I should start by congratulating WTO with the fishery subsidies after decades of hard work. So what's next?
As you said, it spanned 2 decades for the members to negotiate the agreement of fishery subsidy agreement. And we just used 2 years to ratify the important agreement, which is the first sustainability agreement of WTO. As Rebecca, the UNCTAD the Secretary General, said, fish doesn't recognize the boundaries of nations on map. So this is a global issue. This issue can be only addressed in a global manner. So we are so happy that we achieved this agreement and we are in the stage of implementation. So that's the good news of the multilateral system at the difficult time.
And of course, the DG was talking about multilateralism still works as a result of what has been achieved with the fishery subsidies. Is it too much exaggeration?
If you listen her speech, she gave us an important figure. The 72% of global trade is still under the operation of the MFN principle. Of course, at the beginning of this year, the figure was 80%. From 80% to 72% is a reduction. But it also demonstrates that still the majority of the members treasure the WTO's core value, the non-discrimination principle.
But it seems that trade, and particularly tariff, has been weaponized by some nations. How much can WTO survive this round of turbulence?
The most fundamental principle of WTO is MFN, and this principle is shaken.
Most favored nation.
Yeah. WTO is in a crisis, and everyone is stressed. However, WTO is not dying. The multilateral trading system is not broken. We are still working.
What are you working on? The rest of the world thought, WTO probably is already paralyzed, but you said it's not. Tell us why.
Actually, tariff is just part of WTO's framework. Besides tariff, we have non-tariff measures. We have standards, technical barriers to trade. We have intellectual property right. We have the trading service, so on and so forth. We can give you a long list. They are all relevant to the business. I just heard, a company from France to talk about the importance of the notification of the TPT agreement for her company. So without those framework, the situation could be worse for the business. So we cannot take it for granted that all the framework can work automatically. It's not the case.
When the most powerful politician of the biggest trading nation in the world talking about multilateralism is not working, how much evidence do you think WTO has to provide in order to counter-argue that?
At this moment, for the big players, I think it's a good approach for them to talk to each other, like China and the United States. They talk in Geneva, they talk in Stockholm, they talk in Spain, and they reach some agreement. It is good, because this kind of deal can stabilize to some extent of this tension among the countries. But WTO has its own role to play. And after the tariff, we made some research on the application of the tariff measures on different members, especially the vulnerable countries. For the smaller ones, we need to pay more attention, because if elephants fight, the grass will suffer.
We see China and the United States in different rounds of talks, as you suggested, and they even established a mechanism on trade and economic issues. They are trying to adjust the tariffs toward one another out of the circumstances of each time. We are also seeing they are in discussion of TikTok, which is a very interesting case, given WTO's role also in digital trade and many others. We are also seeing how their discussions going to impact the third parties and how the third party is likely to react to both of them or one of them. Can you help us to enlighten how WTO is observing this bilateral interaction between the two largest economies of the world and trying to prepare for the worst and the best.
According to the WTO, the members can have bilateral discussions under the WTO framework. The WTO is a platform that the members can take advantage to talk to each other. This bilateral agreement, bilateral deal, bilateral talk can supplement the multilateral negotiations. We are waiting for what's the final deal between China and the United States and with some other countries. But as I mentioned, the fundamental principle is non-discrimination for WTO. We hope the rest of the members can also treasure this fundamental principle.
What do you think is the most important qualities of WTO legacy that is really relevant today?
Non-discrimination, transparency, and the inclusiveness. So that's the core value of the system. And many WTO members want to preserve during this process of reform.
How is WTO trying to establish a platform for your members, including the two largest economies in the world?
I think there are parallel process. On one hand, there are many bilateral negotiations at the same time. In WTO, we have this process of reform. And the former GC chair, Peter Oberger, is organizing retreat among WTO members, including United States and China. And based on the discussion, he characterized three dimensions of the future's WTO. The first one is about the functioning of the WTO related to the issue like dispute settlement mechanism and decision-making process. And the second category is about the so-called level playing field, the industry subsidy, the industry policy, the state-owned enterprises, so on and so forth, and also the concerns from the developing country on special and differential treatment. And the third dimension is about the future's WTO, like green trade, like climate change mitigation, like digital transformation and inclusiveness.
On some of the level playing field, for example, that phrase is quite specific, but interpretation of that phrase in different cases can be varied from one to another dramatically. And different stakeholders, even in one case, could understand that phrase in very different ways. So how is the reform likely to be done when you have one concept being interpreted in so many different ways?
The reform is about a different approach of negotiation. In the past, we based on the text approach. The lawyers prepare the draft text for the negotiators and then negotiate to each other on the text prepared by the lawyers, but it won't work. We need different approach. Because of the complicated background, we need more data, we need more fact, we need a different analysis about the implication of different policies. And then the members can have candid dialogue. If we have some convergence and we can go to the next stage, it's not mature for the members to conduct the text-based negotiation at this moment, but it's a good time for them to have candid policy dialogue.
I see. On the issue of global governance related to the reforms of WTO, what is likely to be the basic principle of WTO? Some suggest, especially you, Mr. DDG, because you're working on the development of new members. Some suggest one of the issues having so many members is consensus-based can be very difficult to do anything. What do you make of the fact, the legacy of, consensus vis-a-vis the efficiency?
Consensus is the basic principle of WTO decision-making process. It's a good principle. Especially it's good for the smaller members, for the vulnerable countries who has no bargaining power with the big ones. However, consensus is not unanimous. It's about, the common understanding about something and work together. There's no vote. When people know one vote is not in the WTO. So we need to have a common understanding about this term. But behind this is the imbalance of the benefits of the globalization. In developed countries, for example, in the United States, there are different groups. Some benefit a lot, some suffer a lot. And there's another imbalance between the developed countries and the developing ones. Not all developing countries assume they benefit sufficiently from the integration to the global economy. That's the root cause for the international governance. So in order to address those imbalance, we need to help the developing countries to catch up the development of technology, the business new trend, e-commerce, digital trade. With this, they can be more confident in participation of the negotiation, not use the so-called veto right.
But now the trend is that these nations are likely to suffer more as a result of trade disputes. And the dangling role of WTO, which they rely on so much.
I would like to clarify that although there is a paralysis of the appellate body, but we still have the MPAA, the interim mechanism of arbitration among members. It's also under the WTO framework.
Meaning what for our
audience?
Means
what that the countries who participate in this mechanism can address their dispute under this framework.
There's a lot of talk about whether it's going to be WTO -1, meaning the United States, for the rest of the world to function with the WTO platform. What do you think, Mr. DDG?
We cannot leave anyone behind. Although the MPAA is a trilateral agreement among like-minded members, we have many these kind of initiatives like investment facilitation for development, e-commerce agreement. But those are pro-multilateral approach. And there's an open channel for the people, for the members who are not ready to join it. But you need to keep the door open. When they are ready, they can join.
Global trade is at a crossroads, so is the uphill struggle toward stable global trade governance with the WTO at its core. From the floor of the WTO Public Forum in its headquarters in Geneva, CGTN is bringing you the latest insights and action plans on this topic. At this critical moment, join me for trade for our shared future. What about the other roles of WTO, as we mentioned earlier, in terms of China, United States, for example, or China, EU, for example, we have seen during the very early stage of the tariff war, shall we say, both China and the EU took advantage of the WTO mechanism and tried to talk to one another bilaterally on the WTO platform. Do you think that role can still continue? What is the plan of WTO in that regard if the tariff war continues in the world?
And the sophisticated background, the major players like EU, China has more responsibility in the reform of the WTO. I think it's a good mechanism bilaterally for them to talk to each other how to reform this organization. And China just recently established a new mechanism with other members like UK. I think this is a good supplementary dialogue with the multilateral discussion led by the former GC chair. And those members, especially the major players, can contribute to this process and to help to establish the common understanding and to achieve the convergence.
We are seeing very different interest groups these days in the world of trade. Some categorize it as China, United States, EU, some of the largest trading nations or trading blocs. Others are the so-called middle powers. There are, of course, the developing country, global south. There's also the least developed economies, just to name a few. Now, as the DDG of WTO, when you think about reform, how would you characterize different economies so that it can be a systematic approach in everything that you are doing right now? How is WTO looking at these so-called different entities?
WTO is a multilateral system, so there are altogether 160 members. The development stage of those members are different. Even among the developing countries, China, Brazil are more advanced than some other vulnerable countries. That's the reality. But the main imbalance of the benefit of globalization, as I mentioned, on one hand is that in the countries of developed countries, another one is the development gap or development divide between developing and developed economies. Because of these two kinds of imbalance, we have two categories of difficulties. One is about the leadership of this globalization. The second is about the attraction of multilateral trading system to the vulnerable countries. And so my job is focusing on how to assist those vulnerable countries to catch up, to help them to maximize their participation of a global economy, including to get the benefit from the digital transformation and the green transition.
I noticed that even under fishery subsidies, there is a special fund being established to help those least developed economies and those who are likely to suffer at the very early stage of implementation of this wonderful agreement on fish subsidies. So is that going to be the case for the future? Is this going to set an example for the future? Or there are likely to be different ways of handling it?
You know, what's the gap between the developed and developing countries? The main gap is the capacity constraint. You just mentioned the fishery subsidy agreement. For the implementation, you need a certain capacity to do the notification, to notify what kind of fish and you have and what's the situation of the fishery industry. To collect the information is not easy for the smaller economies. If you look at the format, it's quite complicated. So they need assistance. That's the reason why we established the fund to provide a tailor-made program to help them.
But the fund is limited, I mean, in terms of money, right? And yet, the countries that you are going to work for is very diversified. How to make sure at a time when everybody's budget is so constrained, especially WTO. So how will that work for your job?
You are right that we are in budget constraint. We have limited program for capacity building and technical assistance. At the same time, we have a lot of partners. For example, we have the Digital Trade for Africa. We select 10 pilot countries to help them to improve their regulatory framework for digital trade. Our partner is World Bank. We have some software, we have some idea, we have some knowledge, but the World Bank has their capability, they have the finance, and they have been involved in many infrastructure in African countries. We also have a lot of private sectors. When we organized a workshop in Botswana last year on digital trade, we invite Alibaba, Amazon, software to participate, right, and to share their business experience to the participants. So this is a very good experience for us, and the participants welcome very much this kind of new approach. Mm-hmm. So this is a cost efficient approach to do this technical assistance. We will continue to do that.
I see. Global governance is a huge issue, sir, especially at a time when the world is so fragmented. And some powers apparently do not believe in multilateralism. To WTO, what should be the quality of global governance, and what is the role of WTO?
You know, we are approaching to MC14
yes,
in Cameroon, the ministerial conference
next
year in Africa country. And now there's a consensus among the members how to organize this ministerial conference. We need to de-dramatize the conference. We don't need to use this ministerial gathering to put some people to the corner in the negotiations. It won't work. So the members' understanding is that let's take this opportunity to have candid policy dialogue among ministers. I mentioned just now that's the good start for the real WTO reform is also relevant to the future's global governance.
Coming into this building this year, I noticed there's already quite a difference from the ambience that I felt last year, also at the WTO Public Forum. People are more committed to their responsibilities, but at the same time, a bit disillusioned by the reality. During the globalization time, the high days of globalization, everybody talks in the same language. And there seems to be same aspiration. However, these days, things are very different. So how do you work on a daily basis here in WTO, both at the Secretariat of WTO, where you are, sir, and also among the members? They all have their ambassadors and special representatives here. How do they work now?
You are right there. We are living in a different world. However, the globalization is not stopped. It's going on because of the technological development, because of the digital transformation. WTO embrace this kind of development and put this element into the agenda of WTO reform. We are chilled, but we are not frozen in the difficult situation. And we use the different resources we have. As I mentioned, the good partnership with the private sector, with other international organizations to fit for our purpose. And I think many members also recognize that we need a different approach. We need to open the WTO to international community. We need to break the silos approach to go out of this so-called ever power. It won't work. So by conducting this reform, we call it reform by doing. I think we can make incremental progress. Although the WTO reform will not happen overnight, but to achieve incremental progress is feasible.
What are some of the immediate likely results of this incremental progress?
There's a waiting list for the MC14, for example, investment facilitation for development. We have already 127 members. China is one of the initiators for this important program. And e-commerce is another bilateral agreement. And there are some other important discussion in the WTO, like plastic pollution. It's also initiated by China.
Thank you so much, DDG, for giving us this opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's my exclusive interview with Zhang Xiangchen, Deputy Director General of the World Trade Organization, in his office in Geneva, on the sideline of the WTO Public Forum. And that's all the time we have for today, our special program, The Future of Trade. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team here in Geneva and in Beijing. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you tomorrow.